What's up guys, Intelitech Studios here, and today we'll be doing a full review on the Samsung Galaxy Note 20 Ultra, the newest and bestest Note that ever existed. As this particular Note was of course superseded by the Galaxy S22 Ultra, featuring the same boxy design, a similar form factor and S Pen as the previous Note devices, but many of you know that already. The Note 20 Ultra was the last hurrah in the Note series, and the question is it still worth it in 2024? Right off the bat, it really is. It's still an excellent phone. And did I just scratch my laptop? It's still an excellent phone, and overall, it's one that you definitely still should consider. Although, if you're like me and you're coming from an older Note, a Note 10 series device more specifically, it might be a bit harder of an upgrade. If you're coming from something like a Note 9, it might be worth the upgrade because you very well may be used to some of the shortcomings of the 20 Ultra, specifically the lack of 256 gig of base storage. And if you're coming from a Note 9, then you could simply take your existing SD card out, pop it in your Note 20 Ultra, and it'd be like nothing happened, assuming you don't want to spend the extra money on a higher tier storage device, which usually those are hard to find, and as a result, way more expensive than they should be. So if you're coming from a Note 9, or even like an older Note 8, if you're coming from a Note 8, where the 128 gigs of base storage isn't a problem, or even something like a Note 7, where again, 64 gigs of base storage, or less, then my biggest gripe of this, comparing it to the Note 10 Plus, being the halving of the base storage, very well may not be an issue. And I want to mention that straight away, because the biggest thing you're going to notice when you're looking for these phones, and it's going to be the biggest thing that could potentially get in the way. If you're like me and you have enough things stored on your phone that 256 gigs is pretty much mandatory if there is not an SD card slot, then for example, the standard Galaxy Note 20 that does not have an SD card slot very well might not have enough with 128 gigs. Whereas the standard Note 10 has the 256 gig base storage. Again, why they downgraded this going from the more expensive 20 Ultra, I will never understand. So if you go with the previous year's Note 10 Plus, you lose the high refresh rate display and the nice zoom lens, but as well as a little bit of battery life, but you do in fact have more base storage, 256 gigs of base storage, which also means that the price discrepancy between base Note 10 Pluses and base Note 20 Ultras aren't as big of a jump as you would think. So, of course, it depends on what condition you're shopping for. But, for context, I bought a Note 10 Plus that was supposed to be in excellent condition for $290 after tax, and then I got the Note 20 Ultra in a similar condition, although this particular exact one was in better condition. Both of them were not described properly, but in terms of the way it was advertised, I got this one for about $360 after taxes. So there is a very slight jump. So if the 128 versus 256 gig debate doesn't bother you that much because you either don't use that much space or you're going to utilize the SD card slot anyways, then it might be worth spending the extra couple bucks on the Note 20 Ultra over the previous gen Note 10 Plus. So again, that's going to be the biggest reason, or the biggest thing that's going to make you decide between those two handsets if you're shopping for the newest, best Note. Of course, technically speaking, the newest best Note is the Note 20 Ultra, but there's that one little asterisk, that one little caveat that I must mention. There's also 5G. Of course, the Note 20 and Note 20 Ultra series here in the States have 5G. There is a version of the Note 10 Plus that came out in the States that had 5G, but good luck finding one. And of course, there were international versions, both with and without 5G for all models, but if you take any of those and put them on a US network, you're only going to get 4G no matter what. So that's pretty much irrelevant when talking about international phones, but for domestic devices here in the United States, the Note 20 series has 5G, the Note 10 series is stuck on LTE. But as someone who still daily drives a standard Note 10, I don't have any problems with getting signal with LTE. And there's even an argument out there that LTE service for the short term might actually get better as more people are jumping off the 4G network and onto the 5G network, leaving the LTE network to be less congested. So there's a small argument for that as well. But of course, for future proofing, the Note 20 Ultra has 5G, and depending on what carrier model you get, it could have millimeter wave or the various other 5G technologies. So it's very future-proof in that aspect, and it's also very future-proof in the design, as it was the first Note, or well, technically the last Note. Excuse me while I sneeze. But this was this was obviously the final Note, but it set the blueprint for the modern Ultra design trend, where the buttons are on the right side, all the buttons, and where the S Pen is on the left side, which I don't like as much, but, you know, if you're using it without a case, it's easy enough to get used to, and when you're using it with a case, it's a little awkward, but you can still get to it. And of course, it's a Note, so you've got all the same S Pen functionality with screen off memo, pinning to the screen. Stupid Note 7 not wanting to be quiet. But you've got all those functions, and yeah, shush. Okay, we're gonna put you on mute. All right. Sorry, the Note 7 was acting up because it's on and I didn't mute it yet. But, so, the Note 20 Ultra also has the Bluetooth remote functionality with the various gestures and swipey things as the Note 10 has, although my Note 10 that failed on, so it was actually nice being able to have that functionality back compared to my specific Note 10, but they're generally the same. There were some interesting S Pen features introduced, or I should say feature on the Note 20 Ultra, but most of them are pulled from the Note 10 series. I actually don't remember off the top of my head what new features were brought on the 20 series in regards to the S Pen. The biggest thing that was advertised was the lower latency, but that lower latency is really only relevant if you actually have the high refresh rate mode enabled, which I'm going to talk about this real quick because I actually have tested this thoroughly, both with the motion smoothness enabled, which is what it's referred to, and also with it disabled. And what I learned, if we go to display, we can see that right now my motion smoothness is set to standard. And now, if you want to use the Quad HD resolution of this panel, which is the native resolution, and frankly, if you've owned any Note since the Note 4, you're probably used to that anyways, well, minus the base 10 and 20 series. But when I had it on adaptive and it was on the high refresh rate mode, which is what adaptive means, of course the max you can do is 1080p, which isn't the biggest deal in the world, but what I found is that the battery life hit that it takes from the higher refresh rate, in addition to the resolution hit, for me, wasn't worth it. Now, I've commented in the past that high refresh rate displays always make me motion sick, but I have good news. The high refresh rate display on the Note 20 Ultra actually was not bad. For me, it was a little weird at first, but I didn't get motion sick while viewing it. I almost wonder if it was just a issue with other phones that I was trying. But it actually did not give me motion sickness nearly as bad as other high refresh rate displays. And after I left it on for a little bit, even switching back and forth between the Note 20 Ultra and my Note 10, which is 60 Hz, I actually did get used to it. Although it still is a bit jarring going from a 60 Hz display to a 120 Hz because you notice the difference in smoothness. So for me, I recommend leaving it on standard mode and leaving it in the QHD mode so you get the better sharpness and the better battery life, but don't get the higher refresh rate display. At that point, the screen pretty much looks identical to the Note 10 Plus's display. I mean, there's technically a slight increase in size, but it's not noticeable. So that's what I recommend. A lot of people have been complained about the battery life on the Note 20 Ultra, but you can't really fairly compare it to its predecessor with it in a different screen mode, because obviously that takes a hit on the battery life. If you set this to the same resolution and smoothness as the Note 10 Plus, which is Quad HD with standard mode enabled, the battery life actually is better on the Note 20 Ultra compared to the Note 10 Plus. So I want to clear that up because a lot of tech YouTubers never really answered that question. They just simply said, oh, well, I only ever used it on adaptive and the battery life isn't as good as the Note 10 Plus. Well, congrats, I did your job for you, and this actually does have better battery life than the Note 10 Plus. I'm being a little facetious, but it's one thing that no other YouTuber ever really tested from what I can remember. So I tested that myself and can confirm the battery life is better on the Note 20 Ultra compared to the 10 Plus. And obviously it's better compared to the standard Note 10. And the battery life compared to the Note 20 is also pretty close, but again, the 20 Ultra has the edge. This is the best battery life on any phone that I've ever had. Now, it's not twice as good or anything like that, but it's darn close. It's an easy 30-35% jump from the Note 10 Plus and from this on adaptive mode. So switch it to standard mode if you're not absolutely dead set on the high refresh rates, and chances are if you're upgrading from an older device, you know, my boss, for example, upgraded to a Note 20 Ultra from a Note 9, and he complained about the battery life. I told him, switch it to the standard mode and you will gain like 30% in battery life left, and battery life back. And since you're coming from a Note 9, it's not a downgrade. You're simply choosing to get more battery life instead of the nicer display. So it is kind of weird that there isn't the QHD option with the high refresh rate. I actually don't believe it would make that much of a difference in battery life. I think the refresh rate has a much bigger impact on battery life than the display resolution does. But regardless, that is something that I noticed. So, battery life on this is really good when it's tuned properly. And also, this is a pretty big camera bump, but the camera is really good too. It's obviously the best camera on any Note. This does have some issues with focus hunting on nearby subjects. But, of course, my cat is being a nuisance while I'm filming, but not when I actually wanted attention from him, because that's how cats are. Hi, Rocco. But anyways, so nearby focusing is a little bit of an issue on the 20 series. And it's a little bit on the 10 too, but I feel like the Note 9 was actually really good at local focus hunting. And when I say local, I mean like very close-up macro subjects. Note 20 series, presumably because of the giant domino-sized lens, it struggles a little bit to lock on to nearby subjects. But this has the 50x optical zoom, which for taking pictures of the moon and stuff like that is obviously really good. The Note 20, standard Note 20 drops that down to 30 times zoom, and the Note 10 series drops it down to 10 times zoom. So if you love zooming, then the 20 Ultra definitely makes sense as the one to pick out of all the Notes, because the actual quality of this is pretty darn good. I mean, that's a shot that I took of the moon right outside my house, and I gotta admit, that's pretty darn good. I think my palm was hitting this. See, that's the unfortunate thing, is that the palm rejection on this is not the best when you're using it without a case. I felt like it was better on the 10 series, and that's possibly due to the thicker design of the phone, and that probably leaves a little bit less bezel. Again, the Note 9 was still the best for this, because the Note 9 actually had a little bit of a bezel that stuck out. On the Note 9, there's actually a little bit of side bezel. It's not on right now, but there actually was a little bit of a side bezel, which made it a lot easier to use it without a case and not worry about accidental presses, although this did make the screen more fragile. The Note 20 Ultra is definitely stronger in terms of drops than the previous Note 9. The Note 9 is particularly weak because of the amount of exposed glass and the increased weight from previous Note models. The standard Note 20 and the smaller Note 10 are the most durable Note handsets, but the Note 20 Ultra also is very close. But the Note 20 is, of course, going to be the most durable because of the flat display and the plastic back. So, anyways, so I covered durability. I cover the cameras because, I mean, there's not really much else to talk about with the cameras besides the zoom. It's a slight increase from the previous Notes, and the camera is really good. I mean, we're at the point now where pretty much all phone cameras are pretty solid for the most part, but it still struggles with indoor lighting when there isn't a lot of lighting, just like every camera does. But just like we've had with smartphones for the last several years, outdoor shots are really good and have been for a while when there's adequate lighting. There also is the laser autofocus module on this, which does help this thing not focus hunt as long as previous generation units, and especially as the S20 Ultra, as that was a big documented problem with that phone. But of course, I mainly review the Notes, so that problem has been fixed with the Note generation of phone from 2020. So beyond that, we've got, of course, a big crispy display that I already touched on a little bit earlier. And, you know, we've got a dual speaker setup that sounds pretty okay. Now, I mentioned a casing rattle that was affecting my very first Note 10 that I reviewed. Not this one, but the previous one that I reviewed a couple years ago. And that it turns out that casing rattle, I mentioned this with the review of this Note 10, that casing rattle was actually just a fault with that phone. Turns out casing rattle is actually not as much of a problem on the 10 series as I thought. I just got lucky and I got unlucky and got 2 duds in a row. But 20 Ultra eradicates that as a possibility because we actually have a genuine earpiece. It's very hard to see, but we have an actual earpiece in the top of the phone. We don't have the hole on the top of the phone for the speaker like the 10 series has. So, right, I guess the hole's right here next to the SIM card tray. So that little speaker chamber is no longer present on the 20 series or on the 20 Ultra. There actually is a slight earpiece there, and it sounds perfectly fine. There actually wasn't much of a quality difference that I noticed between this and the 10 Plus. Every phone call, like actual phone call, sounds the same as it has for the last 8 years. Sounds clear, but still very muffled, but a lot of that's just network. There's not really much to do with that. But if you're calling on something like Facebook Messenger or Telegram or Discord, the quality is really good. So no real complaints there. There's also a few color choices. The Alpine White, or not Alpine, Mystic White. I forgot Alpine White's the Note 9. Mystic White, Mystic Black, and Mystic Bronze. My boss has the black one, and I don't really like black phones. It's very similar black to the Note 8, so if you like that black, then you'll like it on the 20 Ultra. It's a very dark, rich black. And then the white is a very like pearly white, kind of similar to like what we saw on the Note 5. And the Mystic Bronze is kind of a different color. It's available on the standard Note 20 as well, but it only really looks good on the 20 Ultra. And it has a different texture. So the black and the white have the shiny, shimmery glass that you expect from previous Notes, but the Mystic Bronze has that sort of satin finish that we now expect from the newer Ultra series, like the S21 and newer. So if you're not very picky on color, then the texture could also be a reason to pick the bronze over either the black or the white. Although if you're going to slap a case on anyways, you might as well just get the black and forget about it, because that is going to be the most common color, of course, like with any phone. But I personally don't like black as a color on phones, because it's really hard to see when you're trying to plug in a USB-C cable. You can see with the Note 8, it's all just flat black, and it's kind of hard to see where the actual ports are. Which can be a little frustrating when you're trying to actually plug this in, especially if you're trying to find your phone in the dark. So that can definitely be a bit of a pain. Whereas, there's other colors in the past that have been much better. Like, for example, the coral blue on the Note 7 is still the best color of any Galaxy Note, and that looks decent next to the white. And of course, on my Note 10, we've got the legendary Aura Glow, which is even better. So if I can get these stickers off the back of the phone, there's the Aura Glow, which of course I love showing off because it looks great. And you can see the Mystic Green in the reflection of the Note 20 that I'm currently filming with. So that's another reason you kind of get a little bit of a taste of the video quality, as the Note 20 Ultra is just slightly betterer than the Note 20 standard that I'm filming with. So that's that. Now, as far as the size and the weight, it's a little big for me. I'm very much used to the size of Notes like the Note 7 and the Note 10. These are the perfect size to me. I mean, there's just not really much that really can be done about the size of this. I mean, this is perfect as far as being able to just use this with one hand and not really having to worry about anything. I have a nice grip on it, and it doesn't slip out of my hand. Same with the Note 10. The Note 10 is even a little bit smaller, and it just feels great in the hand. The Note 10 actually I feel is a little bit too small. Not in terms of screen size. The screen size is actually really good, but I wish it was just a touch thicker. I wish it was just thicker and just had a bigger battery in it, and then the Note 10 would be pretty much a perfect phone. But the Note 20 Ultra, I mean, imagine how much thicker this would be if they got rid of the domino. But at the same time, imagine how big of a battery they could fit in here without having to worry about certain issues. So yeah, it's a little bit interesting, but like I said, the battery life wasn't bad to begin with, so I can't complain about that too much. But if I had to really, give some, recommendations for what they could improve, there's not really much at this point. Of course, you know, keeping the SD card slot would have been nice, considering the newer Ultras don't have the SD card slot. And, you know, so this is the last flagship Galaxy phone with an S Pen that also has an SD card slot. So if that's something worth considering. Actually, I think in general this is the last Note with an they're the last Samsung flagship with an SD card slot, because I believe they got rid of it on the 21 series. Actually, I just remembered they did. So last Galaxy flagship with an SD card slot. So if that means something to you, then pick up a Note 20 Ultra. And this thing, of course, is currently on Android 13, so it got a good amount of software support, and at the end of the day, it's pretty good, and it still runs super fast. You've got 12 gigabytes of RAM, just like the Note 10 Plus. And just like with the Note 10 Plus, this thing is not going to run slow for a long time with that 12 gigs of RAM. You know, going all the way back to just a couple generations when we had 4 gigs of RAM and that was the only option, you know, having triple that makes a big difference. Because even the Note 10 has only 8 gigs of RAM, and it pretty much never lags. There's not really much room for stutter on the Note 10 or the Note 20, despite those having 4 gigs of RAM less than the Plus and the Ultra. So lag is not going to be an issue on this for years to come, so it's also a good investment as well. And app support should not be an issue, considering it's on Android 13, we're on Android 14 right now, so we've got support for quite a long time. You could use this until 2030 easily without any issues, assuming nothing breaks on the phone. But yeah, so that's pretty much that. A relatively quick review of, at least by my standards, of the Note 20 Ultra. I mean, because at the same time, you know, a lot of these phones are just pretty close. But yeah, the Note 20 Ultra, if you can deal with the size and the domino-shaped camera, it's a pretty good phone, I gotta admit. And if you want the newest Galaxy flagship with an SD card slot, this is your best bet. And you've got a lot of great features. This thing is super future-proof in terms of all that. But at the same time, if the zoom lens doesn't really do much for you, I could see an argument for wanting to stay with the Note 10 Plus, especially if you're like me and the bigger base storage is a big selling point for you, because trying to find any Galaxy phone that is not the base model is extremely difficult. That's why it really frustrates you when the base models don't have enough storage, like the Note 5 or the Note 20 series. So that's pretty much that. There's not really much else to say about it, but either way, it's a great phone. If you can find it without scratches all over the charging port, or if you don't care, then definitely pick one up. Again, there's plenty of good colors, there's plenty of good cases out there. I wish that it was blue, but you know, what are you gonna do? But the white actually is quite nice. But I'm not sure if I buy a Note 20 Ultra again, if I'm going to get the white again, or if I'm going to get the bronze. I feel like the bronze I'd get sick of after a while, but I do like the white, so who knows, probably doesn't matter. But anyways, let me know your thoughts on the Note 20 Ultra in the comments below, and let me know your thoughts on this video as well if you enjoyed it, or if I missed anything, if you have any other questions about something I missed. I tried to cover the biggest things that stand out about the 20 Ultra, but if you have any other questions about it that are more specific, let me know, and I'll be happy to answer them as soon as I can. Although it is worth noting that I'm actually sending this back right after I film this video because of the scratches on the charging port, and that's the reason why I'm not keeping this. So it may be limited if it's not something that I tested while I had the phone. Anyways, this is IntelliTech Mobile signing out. Have a good one, and let me know what you guys want to see next. Anyways, again, this is IntelliTech Mobile signing out. Have a good one. Peace. And here's a bunch of notes from every generation. There's the 20 Ultra, there's the Note 10, there's the Note 9, there's the Note 8, there's the Note 7. I know there's a Note 5 around here somewhere. Yes, there is. There's a Note 5. So yeah, so we got a lot of phones. A lot of Note phones. Can you tell what my favorite series of phone is? It's definitely not this. It's definitely not this piece of crap. The speaker still doesn't work on this, and Samsung won't fix it. Anyways, have a good one.